people who should have celebrated him. The same people who should have been happy that one of their own, who happened to have been brought up in the palace, was minded to see that they were giving justice. The same people. Now, rather than celebrate him, they rejected him. So I want you to hear me. It takes the power of God. It takes the help of the Almighty for you to fulfill what he has called you to fulfill. The more he reveals it to you, the more you see how inadequate you are in your own strength to do it. But see, Moses did not see that initially. He didn't see that initially. Because he felt he had this working for him, had that working for him, had this, had that. Please, can I tell you, no matter how wealthy your father is, no matter how well connected you think your parents are, I want you to hear me this morning. Their wealth and connection will never, never, never enable you to fulfill God's plans for your life. Because God says, my glory will I not share with another. So Moses fled. He went to the land of Midian for 40 years. He went through the university of difficulties. You see, while he was there, his confidence in himself was eroded. His confidence in his ability to move things, to make things happen, was eroded. When he came to the end of himself, God started with him. When he came to the end of himself. So hear me. If you do not desire to go through some unnecessary and highly unpleasant experiences in life, it is important that you understand from the onset that it will take God's power for you to fulfill his plans for your life. If you fail to have this understanding by instruction, then you will have it by experience, which is more painful. You see that when God came back later to talk to Moses about delivering Israel, Moses said, who am I? Who am I? Who am I to deliver Israel? Then God said, see, come. I've come down now to deliver them. Okay, go now. I'm sending you. You see, when you look at the book of Acts of the Apostles chapter 7, you will find out that the Bible says that the same Moses who was rejected by them was the one God sent to go and bring them out of Egypt. So I've said all that to let you know that what impresses God is his power at work in you and through you. That's what impresses him. So when Peter said, command me, it was an indication of an understanding that without God's authorization, without God's empowerment, he would fail if he attempted to step into the water. Just a clear indication. So when you and I go to the secret place with the word and in prayer, and we are seeking God, what we are telling him by our actions is that we don't trust in our ability to decide what path to take or to attempt to fulfill his plans for us. That is the signal God gets. But when we ignore the secret place, ignore our Bibles, ignore time with him, and simply, rush on headlong into the things we feel are urgent, we also give a signal that we can do without him. And that's a very dangerous position to be in. Terribly dangerous, sir. So, come. Now, the next thing I want you to see very quickly that enabled Peter to walk on the water, because of course the power of God was activated on his behalf and he was able to walk on the water, was the fact that when Peter received the word from Jesus, that word come, he did something about it. The Bible says that he stepped out of the boat. Can we see it? Matthew chapter 14. Let's go back there. Verse 29. So he said, come. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. Jesus commanded him to come. And the Bible says he came down out of the boat. He came down out of the boat. You see, if you will see the power of God activated on your behalf, you must be willing to leave your comfort zone. You must be willing to leave your comfort zone at God's instruction. Do you understand that? At God's instruction. You see, it was more comfortable being in the boat than being on the sea. It was actually safer, humanly speaking, to be in the boat. At least even if the boat is rocking, you know there's something you can hold on to. You understand? There's something you can hold on to while it is rocking. But while you're walking on the water side, there's nothing you can hold on to. But he had to be willing to step out. He had to be willing to step out. One of the reasons many people have not seen God's power move on their behalf the way God desires it to be is simply because they have been unwilling to act on what God has told them. They have been unwilling to act on what God has told them. Now, have you noticed that Jesus did not calm the storm before commanding Peter to walk on the water? He was walking on the stormy sea, and he commanded Peter to join him on the stormy sea. Please listen. If you are waiting for all the T's to be dotted, no? For all the T's to be crossed and the I's to be what? Dotted. Before you do what God is telling you to do concerning his plans for your life, you will not do anything. The sea was still raging. But Jesus expected him to walk on that water. So he said, come. So you must understand that there are directives that God will give you right in the middle of the storm of your life. Right in the middle of, things that seem contrary. That is why the Bible says in the book of Proverbs chapter 3 verse 5 that we should trust in the Lord with all our heart and not lean on our understanding. Come! And yet there was everywhere. Come! When God speaks to you, the only acceptable response is obedience. However, God never imposes his will on anybody. So when he speaks to you, he leaves you with a choice as to whether you obey or not. So, but if you want to see his power activated on your behalf, his dynamic power activated in your life, then you must obey him. You must make up your mind to leave the comfort zone. You must leave that place of familiarity, and then you must venture into unfamiliar territory at the instance of his word. Because every move that will take you further will have a level of risk involved. Come! The most important thing is to receive that revelation, that word first. Once you have it, then you have a responsibility to act on it. You have a responsibility to obey it. You see, when you hear from God, the devil will also speak to you. Because what he usually does is to speak to people after they have heard from God in order to counter what they have heard. That's what he does. Sometimes his speaking may come through a brother, a friend, an acquaintance, or somebody, who ordinarily loves and cares for you. But we need to be vigilant and alert enough to detect Satan's subtleties when he's behind such words, of encouragement or words of caution, in quote, and so on. The other disciples were in the boat. But when Jesus said come, the word come was not for Philip. That word was not for Matthew. That word was for Peter. Because Peter said, if it is you, command me. He didn't say command us. He said command me to come to you on the water. So this simply implies that when you hear from him specifically, it is your own responsibility to obey. It is your responsibility. Are you getting what I'm saying? It wasn't Matthew's responsibility to obey on Peter's behalf. Neither was it Philip's responsibility to do so. It was squarely Peter's responsibility. But thank God the Bible says he took a step out of the boat. Now, I'm sure he didn't just jump out. He took a baby step. He just stepped out to test the waters, which is not bad. But he did something. He acted on that word. He acted on what God had told him. He did something. He did something. So this morning, I want to encourage you to seek him in the secret place, to seek to hear him, to seek to receive from him by spending time in his word, spending time in the place of prayer, calling on him, and then taking the next step of obedience, the next step of acting on what he tells you. Now, when Peter acted on what Jesus had commanded him to do, the Bible says he walked on the water. So that means, in spite of the storm, in spite of the boisterous condition of the sea, Peter was able to walk on the water. He did the impossible. The waves were raging, but he was stepping on them like Jesus was doing. You can rise above the challenges the enemy confronts you with. You can rise above the You can rise above the storms of life that confront you. You can rise above them if you are acting on his word. So Peter walked on the water. He did the impossible. He did the impossible because he heard from God and allowed himself to see the invisible. He heard from God and acted on what God had told him. You see, before Peter stepped out, he must have seen himself walking on the water because of the word that Jesus had given him. Because it is very difficult for you to do something you have never seen yourself doing. Are you getting what I'm saying? Usually, before your body goes somewhere, your mind has gone there first. So he walked on the water. And I believe very strongly that while he walked on the water, God was elated. God was happy. God was joyful. Because he was activating the power of God. Hear me. When you let God's power undertake for you, when you let God's power, his dynamic power, do things on your behalf, God is happy. He is happy. He's happy when his power is flowing through your business, through your ministry, your marriage, your career, your studies. When his power is working on your behalf, God is happy. It brings him joy. Because what brings God joy is his power at work, because he rules by his power. It brings him joy. But there's something I want you to understand this morning. And that is the fact that no matter how much the power of God is at work in your life, what it took you to see it begin to manifest is what it will take you to see it continue to manifest. Because the way in is the way forward. It's the way forward. Peter walked on the water. That was wonderful. I'm sure the other disciples were like, what's happening here? And while he was walking on the water, God's kingdom was being glorified. God's name, rather, was being glorified. And the kingdom of the enemy was suffering great damage, because something was happening in the hearts of those who watched him walk on the water. Please hear me. Your life was designed to be a testimony. Are you getting what I'm saying? A great testimony. Your life was designed to be a wonderful scorecard before men. A reflection of the goodness of God, of the power of God, of the caring nature of God. Peter walked on the water. Why? He took the first step. But before he was able to take that first step, there was something he must have done. He must have made sure that he did not let the opinions of the people in the boat, or what the wind and the rest of the things happening around were saying. His focus was on Jesus and on the word he had received from Jesus. But what he failed to understand was that the same way he had begun taking the first step was the same way he ought to continue. So he was walking towards Jesus. I am sure he was excited himself. But at a point, the Bible tells us that he saw, see that in verse 30. Say, but when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid. Can you see that? When he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid. The question is, was he able to begin that journey because the waters were calm? No. It wasn't the calm nature of the water that made it possible for him to walk on the water. It was the word he had received from God.